Teen Street 2008 is all about Paul, and the theme is blind sight, and it's about a man who encountered Jesus on the road to Damascus, and he was headed to Damascus to persecute followers of the way, followers of Jesus. And Paul came face to face with Jesus and fell on his face and was blind for 3 days after that. And during those 3 days, I'd love to know what went on in Paul's head during those 3 days, when he was in darkness and God spoke to him during that time. But those 3 days changed the course of his life completely. And you see a man that laid down everything that had gone on before and totally left it all behind and pursued what God called him to. Just an amazing turnaround. He would have been a very wealthy man, would have been a man of great power and reputation, and was just blazing ahead as this Pharisee who was really respected. And yet he everything that had been of great importance and had been of great worth to him, he said, I count it all worthless, and he pursued God. He saw things that God showed him, and that's the way he lived. And he was blind to the things that often we react to around us, and he lived according to what God showed him and what God was saying to him. And so we're calling the teenagers to live a life like Paul, of blindness almost, where Paul would say that so we don't live by what is seen, but we live according to what is unseen. That's what Paul said. And so that's what blind sight is all about, is living according to what is unseen. Not the temporary stuff now, but the eternal stuff and the things that God's saying to us and whispering to us and showing us. That's what we're calling the teenagers to.
The thing I love the most about what God's opening up for us for Teen Street 2008 is that it walks straight from where we left off last year with Contagious, where God had opened up this whole idea of living as contagious beings, and that everything that He pours into us, we need to be ready for that to pour out to the people around us. We are wide open for Him to use us, for us to hear Him and be ready to obey. And this whole idea of blind sight is that as we are living as contagious beings, in the same way as Paul was, we need to be blind to expectations of the world, to things that are pulling us from side to side of the world, and say we want to be blind to those things, but we want to be focused on Jesus. And in the midst of that, we need to, and young people have to live in the world that they live in. So we want to be so practical this year as well. So how do we live blinded to those things and focused completely on Jesus? And it's so cool what God is saying to us about these things, because just to be able to focus on someone like Paul, who did live in absolute surrender to Jesus. There was no compromise on his part, and he seemed so raw and so honest about where he was at. And to look at him and also relate him to other characters in the Bible, we see this pattern of people who, when they met God and when they met Jesus, everything was different. It wasn't really a pull back and forth. Internally it was, but externally they were completely focused about where they were going and what they were doing. And we want to see teenagers who are totally committed, no matter what is going on around them, no matter what's going on inside of them, that they belong to Jesus. And that as they belong to Jesus and hear from Him, that they're going to see Him lifted up in their situations around them.
But we have this treasure in jars of clay to show that this all-surpassing power is from God and not from us. We are hard-pressed on every side but not crushed, perplexed but not in despair, persecuted but not abandoned, struck down but not destroyed. For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. For what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal.
Here's a snapshot of the Teen Street week. We begin with blind sight, unpacking the whole idea of what is blind sight, what it means to live blinded to the world around us, focused on Jesus. Moving on to this whole idea of absolute surrender. Paul had to let go of everything that he had before and run the race set before him. He was a human. We want to look at the idea of stepping out of our humanity, all of the things that make us up, our goods and our bads, and stepping out of those things and into everything that God has created us to be. And as we do that, we need to live as people who are thankful. We need to live as people who really understand what God has saved us from, what God has brought us into in our lives, and live a life of thankfulness and gratitude. And we believe that as young people begin to live that way, that they will be more of a servant to those around them, because they will know how much they were served by their God, and they will serve the people around them. Then this whole idea of relentless love, no agenda, that we live as people who our love has no limits. We don't draw any lines in the sand with our love. We don't say, I love them so that this will happen to me. I love them because we love like Jesus loved. We live that like Jesus lived, and so that everyone around us is drawn into our love and move towards the love that God has for them. And then we want to go on and look at bringing glory and renown to God. How do we bring glory to Jesus every day in our lives? What does that look like? So we will see you really soon, sooner than you think, because it's creeping up on us, and I know the piles of papers are getting higher on your desk, and we're just again humbled and thrilled to be involved this year, to be allowed by God to hold the things that He is saying in our hearts and in our hands and be able to express them. And we want to serve alongside you, and we really look forward to spending time with you, to hanging out. Hopefully we will get some time to hang out. And we just want to send our blessing and our thankfulness and our love and our prayer to you guys, and have a great time in Germany.